Hello and welcome back. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump says the operation in Venezuela, which culminated with strikes on the capital and the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, were part of what he coined the Donro Doctrine. China's foreign ministry says the United States should immediately release Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife and resolve the situation in Venezuela through dialogue and negotiation. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung arrives in China, eager to boost economic ties with Seoul's largest trading partner while keeping a lid on potentially explosive issues such as Taiwan. Yemen's southern separatists welcome a call for dialogue by Saudi Arabia to end the recent military escalation, a potential sign that an unusually public confrontation between the kingdom and the UAE may be easing. US President Donald Trump says he was frustrated with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the continued war in Ukraine, repeating that he had initially believed that ending the war would be easy. Myanmar's military government to release 6,186 prisoners under an amnesty marking Independence Day, a week after a multi-stage general election began in the impoverished Southeast Asian nation. Starlink to provide free broadband service to the people of Venezuela till February 3, ensuring continued connectivity. Elon Musk posted on X saying that the move was in support of the people of Venezuela. Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro has arrived at the Brooklyn Detention Center in New York following his indictment in the Southern District. The United Kingdom and France have jointly struck a suspected ISIS weapons dump in Syria. Britain's defense ministry said the strikes were to help prevent resurgence of the Daesh terrorist movement. The Constitutional Chamber of Venezuela's Supreme Court ordered that Vice President Delcy Rodriguez assume the role of acting president of the country in the absence of Nicolas Maduro. Alright viewers, our top focus here on NewsX World remains the Venezuela situation and the capture of Nicolas Maduro by Donald Trump. Now, President Trump is saying that the US military operation in Venezuela, which included strikes on the capital and the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, was carried out under what he said was the Donro Doctrine, mocking the Monroe Doctrine. Trump said Washington acted after determining that Venezuela under Maduro had allowed foreign adversaries to operate in the region and pursue offensive military capabilities. He added that these activities posed a direct threat to US interests and lives, prompting decisive action by American forces. Let's first listen in to his statement and him mocking the Monroe Doctrine using the Donro Doctrine term that he has coined.
Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines, and the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore.
The Monroe Doctrine, issued by US President James Monroe in 1823, warned European powers from interfering in countries in the Western Hemisphere. Monroe's Secretary of State and presidential successor John Quincy Adams developed the doctrine as a means to ward off European countries from interfering with the affairs of the Latin American countries that had declared their independence from countries like Spain and France, according to the State Department then. It was also meant to deter Russia from expanding into Alaska. In the more than 200 years since then, U.S. presidents have relied on the Monroe Doctrine to thwart foreign meddling in Latin America. The doctrine was invoked by U.S. diplomats in 1865 to support Mexican President Benito Juárez in his revolt against French Emperor Maximilian. Former President Theodore Roosevelt expanded the doctrine to justify military intervention across Latin America. Some scholars have scrutinized this expansion, arguing that the doctrine allowed U.S. military operations to destabilize left-wing governments not sympathetic to U.S. interests, particularly during the Cold War. All right, and now I request retired Major General Sudhakar Ji to join me in this discussion. He is a senior strategic and international affairs expert and joins us from New Delhi. Well, thank you very much, General Sudhakar, for joining me in this discussion. It's good to see you. Sudhakar Ji, first of all, Trump has clearly gone on to mock the Monroe Doctrine, coining the Donero term. Do you think he would be now thinking that he finally has the 51st state of the United States of America that he had been long aspiring, not Canada, but Venezuela?
Good afternoon, Kriti. Thank you for your patience and giving me a chance and inviting me to your show once again. Well, your question has got multiple dimensions, but let me simplify and give you a very short answer. No. 51st state of USA is just a pipe dream. And by removing or carrying out regime change, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of a country is not discounted or totally obliterated from the map of the world, and that too against the rules-based international order as prevalent in the world order today. So he's playing with fire. This is a very dangerous thing, but there is a narrative behind it. If you have time, I would like to explain. I sought time yesterday in the NewsX, but since NewsX did not have time, despite 2-3 rounds, I was not given a chance to.
Please, feel free. Yeah.
If you have time, I would like to explain.
Please go ahead.
Why has Donald Trump done what he has done? This is to be understood. So, without becoming verbose in my articulation, I would like to take minds of our viewers back to the early part when Donald Trump came into his chair for the second presidency tenure 2.0 from 20 January 2025. Soon after that, there was a flip-flop when Donald Trump was, although he came with a assured commitment given to the constituency, domestic constituency, that he will do everything possible under the sun to bring some kind of ceasefire to this two ongoing mindless conflict, one in Central Europe, the other in Middle East. So therefore he was very determined, but as he went along, he realized that it was not that simple, it was a very complex issue. And in the complexity of the issues, at times he used to give orders to Zelensky that to mellow down, he cannot win this war, therefore it is better to reconcile and accept the fait accompli and take ceasefire in earnest. So this did not work out, and subsequently he came under pressure, deep state of USA being what it is. They coerced him, they forced him to provide long-range missiles and the warheads to Ukraine. This is the turning point in the entire issue. This is the start point of what we have witnessed in Venezuela. And consequent to that, Russia and Cuba, they had gone in for a strategic partnership agreement sometime in the month of March 2025. And soon after that, 2 months or within a couple of days, we saw perhaps the global citizens have missed out the woods for the trees. There were Russian vessels, the Russian, to the best of my memory, there were submarines as also frigates in the Cuban water, like it had happened sometime in 1962. So this actually created panic and jitters in the American think tank and the Mandarins who are talking about geopolitics, geoeconomics, trying to strategize everything. Thereafter, the drafting of the national security strategy, which was already ongoing and in progress, it underwent not a subtle but a drastic change. So the national security strategy drafted and redrafted, and what came out was in the last week of November, which actually highlighted the centrality of Donald Trump's 2.0 tenure, that is the Monroe Doctrine. That Monroe Doctrine, as you have already explained in your preamble, I won't like to, dilate too much, except for one thing, that the American society or the nation, they have gravitated from geopolitics, which they applied against Soviet Union in Cold War 1.0, to geoeconomics, which is dominated presently by China. It has left America behind by many goalposts and many milestones. So when you talk about geoeconomics, what it means is that America willy-nilly is pulling back from whichever assistance and the commitment it was living up to was at the cost of the exchequer of USA. It was pulling back from Europe. It was pulling back from the support it was extending to Ukraine. It is pulling back from the Indo-Pacific, also pulling back to an extent from Africa, as also, except for Nigeria, where they have struck, as you know, for the ISIS crisis there. And pulling back means basically to consolidate the internal dimensions of USA as a nation, because there are too many challenges. Plus, what had happened was, when you see the Russian vessels in the Cuban waters are not very far off from Caribbean Sea. And Caribbean Sea is all along the coastline of Venezuela. Since then, the Russian presence has been actually dominating, and footprint has been expanding. That has actually given a turning point to Donald Trump and the tenure, that nothing doing, they have to focus on this particular aspect, if not Monroe Doctrine, call it by any name. Basically, what it means is that they have to give a pushback to China. They have to ensure that the Western Hemisphere remains under the domain and the responsibility of security and safety of America, which is supposed to be responsible for North America as also South America, mindful of the fact that China has penetrated into Latin America in past 30-40 years significantly, thereby denying the foothold and the toehold of domination which USA had. Last but not the least, if you allow one more point, inside what has happened is, from 1998 till date, Venezuela has had a long streak, long tenure of leftist regime. Well, whether you talk about Hugo Chavez, he started from 1998. He passed away, I think, close to 2012 or 13. Thereafter, Maduro took over. He was the vice president. He was elected to power, and he had first tenure, second tenure, and now he has been elected, and by the people of Venezuela. But what was actually a turning point in the relationship between USA and Venezuela was, 20 years back, USA had asked Venezuela for the oil fields. Venezuela had said no. And in 2005, close to 2008, the ExxonMobil, this is the oil company, company which looks after oil exploration in USA. They had hit a very significant portion of a neighboring country called Guyana, and they started exploring and also commercial mining of the oil by 2018, 2019, and they're earning billions of dollars. So during this time frame, USA again had asked Venezuela that they would like to take the oil fields of Venezuela, to which Venezuela had said, sorry, ours is a sovereign country and we respect our sovereignty and territorial integrity. We'll continue. The American companies have already taken one of the country's oil fields. And thereafter, if you recall, take your mind back, the Venezuela had declared the Guyana oil fields as a part of disputed territory. They started claiming that it belongs to Venezuela. So there is a contradiction, there is a conflict also going on between Guyana and Venezuela, to which America was determined. Donald Trump, incidentally, has been planning for regime change right since his previous tenure. In the year 2017, he had already told Venezuela that the day is not far wherein the leftist regime is going to be seeing a new door opening up so that the new people come in and America goes back to capture the oil fields of the Venezuela. And it has been planning and planning and planning. Now in the second tenure, he has implemented the plan which the seeds of which was sown in his mind way back in his first tenure.
Yeah.
And now what we have seen is a demonstration of a surgical operation with minimum collateral damage by degrading the surveillance and I would say
yeah, that's exactly then what I want to ask you now, Sudhakarji. Would you say the precision of the strikes that were carried out and the Operation Absolute Resolve leading to the capture of Maduro and his wife is also signaling the failure of the Chinese surveillance systems that Venezuela was relying on?
Okay, good questions. So, very good thing that you have asked and raised the name of China. Incidentally, what has happened is you would agree with me that there is a not subtle, but there is a significant change in the geopolitics of the world order. The new strategic doctrine or the strategy which has come out from USA, it clearly says that Russia is amongst the peer group, and they have indicated to the effect that the status of G8 membership of Russia is going to be restored very soon. Plus, they will be taken back to the global geopolitics and integrated with the leading economies. One. Number two, they have also indicated that China is a good friend, if not a hostile country. It is a friend. They would like to do business. And in that they have also indicated about Taiwan that the TRA, which was signed way back in 1979 under the paradigm of strategic ambiguity, also has undergone change. They have only said that they will be helping and supporting the allies in the South China Sea or along the East Japan Sea. And the allies are Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, etc., etc. That's what they mean. But quietly and subtly they have indicated that they will neither raise any voice nor any eyebrows. So that means it's going to be a smooth sail for China for reunification of Taiwan. So what it brings to me is that the new terminology of G2. G2 is America and China. Okay. Both of them tacitly or behind the door, they have agreed that neither USA will point a finger at what China is doing, nor China will point a finger at what USA is doing. So this answers your question as to, despite the fact China knew that all this is going to happen, therefore they have given a smooth pass to USA to have their dominance in the sphere of influence of Americas, which is presently being called as Dun Monroe.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that assessment. To continue to stay on with me, please, Sudhakarji. We move ahead now. Viewers, let's also tell you that Donald Trump has said that the U.S. will extract oil from Venezuela to cover the costs of its intervention there, adding that American oil companies will rebuild the country and reimburse Washington for all expenses. Speaking at a news conference after the capture of Venezuelan leader Maduro, Trump said the operation would not cost the U.S. anything. Let's listen into that statement first, and then we'll have that discussion with Sudhakarji.
Well, you know, it won't cost us anything because the money coming out of the ground is very substantial. So it's not going to cost us anything. We will. Well, we want safety there. We want to be surrounded by countries that aren't housing all of our enemies all over the world. That's what was happening, and you don't want to have that. But we're going to be rebuilding, and we're not spending money. The oil companies are going to go in. They're going to spend money. We're going to take back the oil that, frankly, we should have taken back a long time ago. A lot of money is coming out of the ground. We're going to get reimbursed for all of that. We're going to get reimbursed for everything that we spend. So it's going to be a very important. This is a very big evening that took place last night. We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries. And we also have to have energy, very important. We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look, it was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year is going to be a great thing. And the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
All right. Sudhakarji, please join us back for this discussion. Now, would you say this statement is only going on to say Trump probably thinks heads I win, tails you lose?
Not really. Donald Trump is a businessman.
Yeah.
He's looking beyond what is visible. Next target, I have been saying time and again, although people have been saying that uh, will be Colombia. And only
Hmm.
issue that I wish to highlight as a citizen of this world or
Colombia,
citizen.
by the way, was the first nation to issue a condemnation and call for the UN to meet.
You may do anything. Any condemnation is not going to deter or discourage Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And I go by your statement. Heads you win and tails you lose. The fact of the matter remains that there is a hidden agenda behind all this. American economy is in doldrums. $38 trillion debt means 128 to 130% debt to GDP ratio. What it means is they require close to 1 trillion US dollar just simply to do the servicing of the interest. And more than that, to run the country, they require something close to $6 trillion. The revenue generation is 4 trillion. There's a deficit of 2 trillion here, deficit of 1 trillion, 3 trillion is huge amount of money. So at the moment, the CIA has been given the responsibility of hidden agendas. The hidden agendas are basically fivefold. Wherever these fivefold or five components are visible or available, they will channelize their, calibrate their effort in a manner so that revenue generation from these five components can be extracted or harnessed for the benefit, larger good of US. What are these five components? First and foremost is oil. Oil market in the world is close to 2.1 or more than that to 2.6 trillion dollar. Next is you have is the defense industry. It's close to 2 trillion US dollar. Next is the pharmaceutical, 1.4 to 1.6 trillion. Next is the drug money. It's about 1.8 to 2.3 trillion US dollar. Last but not the least, the list is actually ever expanding and increasing. Is the rare earth element, which is the new oil of 21st century. CIA has been indirectly or directly told that your job decides what you are doing, regime change or no change, is to look for those places where you tap such kind of potential resources, natural. There is another thing, Kriti, I want to also share, being a student of geopolitics. The Western Hemisphere, they also have another paradigm of traditional understanding. What is that traditional understanding? Anything and everything which is of natural resource, which is claimed to be the sovereign right of the sovereign countries in Latin America, as per the traditional and historical understanding, it is assumed that they will be harnessed or harvested or be mined by the American companies. It is understood that way. It is not happening because of loss of influence and the declining influence of the US over the years. China has penetrated and started actually dominating all this, but America is trying to push itself and push China back so that it is able to follow not Monroe Doctrine, call it Don Monroe Doctrine. This is what the aim is. And
Donjo,
if
yeah.
so this is what the aim is. But besides this aim, there is also another thing happening. Whichever places where USA and its dominance had been maintained way back in Cold War 1.0, these places they had vacated post disintegration of USSR, and like you have East Asia, South China Sea, you have Southeast Asia, you have South Asia. US willy-nilly has started going back to these places to restore its domination back. And therefore you find them in Pakistan, therefore you find them in Bangladesh in form of joint military exercise. Footprints are increasing. I'm not saying the military bases are increasing. Definitely the footprints they are eyeing for Bagram airfield in Afghanistan and likewise. So therefore to say that there is a bigger aim than what is happening. Maybe the next target could be Cuba. People are saying Cuba, in my opinion, there may be nothing but Colombia being the adjoining country from which two things are happening. First and foremost, if you dig up the UN document, carry out a little bit of not research, kind of a comprehensive study, there are two things which are standing out. First and foremost, the established routes of induction or infiltration of cocaine or drugs are actually Colombia, Mexico, and USA. From Colombia, the talk about fentanyl, the precursor medicine to make fentanyl, which is coming from China, it comes to Colombia and thereafter goes to Mexico or goes directly into USA. Same is the case with cocaine. You look at the president of Honduras, he is in the jail of USA. There was bounty on his head And there is also an allegation that he had exported or facilitated export of 450 tons of cocaine into USA during his tenure. Although he is being condoned, it is being overlooked by Donald Trump. But these are the kinds of charges. Venezuela does not figure anywhere in that document as far as the drugs are concerned, as far as the cocaine is concerned. Therefore, it is only a fabrication. It is a story like the way they had built when they went into Iraq. This is all I have to share with you, Preeti. Back to you, please.
Thank you very much, Sudhakarji. Pleasure to have you as always on NewsX World. We'll continue that discussion, but for now we're going to proceed. Viewers, let's also give you some more information that's now coming in. And now, as far as the details of the operations are concerned, we're getting some more inputs. A US military mission that led to the capture of Maduro, Operation Absolute Resolve, described as unprecedented in scale, involved over 150 aircraft. The mission, which took place in the early hours of January 2, resulted in the deaths of at least 40 people, including military personnel and civilians. While US President Donald Trump has confirmed that no American soldiers were killed, he noted that some were injured during the operation. The US also faced hostile fire while extracting Maduro and his wife, with a helicopter sustaining damage but remaining operational. The aftermath has sparked anger and fear among locals, with many blaming greed for the attack and the loss of lives. All right, I now request Professor Veselin Popovsky to join me in this discussion here. He's Professor and Vice Dean at Jindal Global Law School and joins us from Bulgaria. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us in this discussion. Sorry to keep you waiting for that long. Professor, we can all debate about the manner in which Trump has now taken over the Venezuelan government. That's a long discussion. But for now, let's talk about the precision of the operation that was carried out. 4 bases, military bases, were struck. No casualties to the US forces. 40 have been killed in Venezuela. Those details are now freshly emerging. But what kind of planning and what kind of precision do you think would have gone in this operation? We have details about it being started as long back as in August. Trump was to carry out this operation in December, but he postponed it due to some weather conditions. But do you think this covert CIA operation probably had some sleuths that were in the vicinity of Nicolas Maduro?
Yes, I think it was quickly executed, no doubt about that. Professional work for few hours, minimal casualties.
Yeah.
Let me just remind you what happened in Panama in 1989 when they went to arrest Manuel Noriega. It took several weeks, a lot of more, 500 casualties. Noriega escaped into the Vatican embassy and only surrendered, ironically, on the 3rd of January in 1990. Exactly on that day, also Manuel Noriega surrendered, and the United States flew him to Florida to face charges of narco trafficking, and he got the 40 years. So very similar situation, but as you pointed, this time it happened over a few hours, not over a few weeks. So probably very well planned in advance, excellent intelligence, good leads to where he is. Probably some people in Venezuela also cooperated with that. I'm sure it would have been executed so well, force with proportionality, with very minimal casualties over a few hours. Today, we don't see a civil war in Venezuela. I don't know what people are talking about vacuum, about the end of the United Nations, nothing of this. United Nations wakes up in a good mood. They work all over the world. International law is there with all the treaties and conventions, and 99% of the countries comply with international law daily, hourly. So there is nothing wrong in international law.
But those are only the weaker states, right? Hegemonic powers like the US and China, they're just going on about doing whatever it pleases them. They're not looking at the UN. They're not fearful of any international organization. They're just working on plain, pure business interests of their leaders.
I fully agree, Kirti. You're absolutely right here. But the big powers never did that. They didn't do it 10 and 20 and 30, and over the Cold War, they didn't go to the Security Council to ask for any permission. The Vietnam War, the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, they did it because they are permanent members of the Security Council and they can veto any resolution. So that's wrong in the United Nations. The veto is wrong. The permanent membership in the Security Council is wrong. That part of the UN is wrong, but everything else in international law and in the UN Charter is right.
All right. All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that I have for this discussion. But thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. And with that, we're now going to proceed. Now, Myanmar's military government has announced an amnesty to mark Independence Day with 6,186 prisoners said to be released. The amnesty includes 52 foreigners and is being called a humanitarian gesture aimed at easing public concerns. The junta also reduced sentences by 1/6, excluding those convicted of serious crimes like murder, terrorism, and drug offenses. However, it remains unclear if political detainees, including those arrested in the aftermath of the 2021 coup, will be freed. Since the coup, more than 30,000 people have been detained on political charges, and the country remains in turmoil with ongoing armed resistance and ethnic conflict. Myanmar also held its first round of elections last weekend, a vote widely condemned by opposition groups and international bodies as a sham, given the exclusion of anti-junta political parties. All right, let's now also track some more news from South Asia. Bangladesh will request their matches for the next month's T20 World Cup to be played in Sri Lanka after India has forced Bangladeshi players to quit the Indian Premier League. Asif Narzul, Youth and Sports Advisor in the interim government, has said that Bangladesh will not accept insult to Bangladeshi cricket for cricketers and Bangladesh at any circumstances. Bangladesh's fast bowler Mustafizur Rahman was released by Kolkata Knight Riders after the IPL teams were advised by the BCCI following the tension between India and Bangladesh. Meanwhile, BCCI has responded by saying that Bangladesh's matches from India will be a logistical nightmare and that one cannot keep changing the schedule at someone's whim and fancy. BCCI has also said that Bangladesh should think about opposition teams, their air tickets and hotels are booked. All right, that's all we have time for in this edition of the World Report on NewsX World. But thanks for staying tuned for all international news and updates right here.